Welcome to God with George Ortega and Joshua Bond. This is episode number 10. We're recording it on Thursday, November 5th at 4:27 p.m. Eastern Time. And we've been going through over the last episode or two the illusions that basically we suffer about God and about reality that basically don't allow us to evolve, to create as good a world as possible. We're going to continue with that, but because, this election just happened, it's not really, done yet. They still haven't finished the counting. We thought it'd be an important kind of a show to relate what's happening in politics today, at least here in the United States, with God. How does God play into this? And we're going to try, because we have our different political ideologies and all that, but I want to just narrow this very, very, very closely to this idea of God. So Joshua, what role is God playing in this? Why do you think he's having, things play out the way they are and the way they are?
Yeah, I won't put words in God's mouth, but for me, the my own personal convictions are to look at our understanding of God, and for almost everybody that I know, that comes from religion and how religion has evolved for thousands of years. And I want to talk about God and our relationship to God and how that can better our lives, but I also want to respect that we're either limited or empowered by how religion views God, and how religion's story about God either limits us or empowers us to do that. And so I'm reminded of this bipartisan election and these just crazy politics, these times where we have almost every city has boarded up windows because they fear riots from the politics. And that's just so insane. That's never happened before in this country.
All right, so let's turn it straight to God. So God is doing this. We both know that we human beings do not have a free will. So why do you think God is doing this?
Well, I would hope that it would get us to take a step back, right? Is this the way we want to run our country? Is this politics shenanigans good for us? And if it's getting to this point, then how do we obviously have to have a government. We have to have a president. We have to have politics. We have to have news. What can we learn from this? What would be the pious? What would be the righteous track to go from here? Realizing that both sides have their extremes. Both sides have their tendency towards anger, frustration, or even delusion, and recognizing that and framing that in the context of for centuries people have believed in their God being the one true God, and every other God is a false God, and comparing that to how now we believe our vote, our desire for who should be president,
right, Josh,
is the one best.
Yes.
Go
so
ahead.
In other words, yes, the Republicans believe that God is on their side. We Democrats believe that God is on our side. So yes, we get this. But the question is, and I have a feeling that God is pissed at both of us. God's pissed at the Republicans and the Democrats. Let's explore because this pandemic, the economic turndown, the wildfires, the hurricanes, God is obviously angry. What is he angry? And you won't hear this from the kind of an objective exploring this from the politicians, because they're too partisan to do this. So let's explore why God is angry at the Republicans, why God is angry at the Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't go down that road because I've every time you find somebody saying God's angry at somebody for some reason, you can also find somebody preaching that God's angry for the opposite reason at the opposite people.
That's what we need to explore, because God, it seems that God is angry. I mean, it seems and then if we want to make the case that God isn't, then I'd like to hear that.
Okay, well, we should do that real quick. I think we can do that really quickly, and we can hold both concepts in mind. So if we define God as everything and God as the system, as the structure, as our, everything, including our relationships and politics and news and how that's playing out, then I don't know if angry is the right word, but it's not harmonious. It's not holistic. It's not calm. It's not peaceful. It's not the attributes of God we'd think of. And I certainly would agree with that. Now, I guess I'm afraid of, some people who have a traditional concept of God, which would be some old man in the clouds that's trying to strike us down, causing hurricanes because there's gay people or whatever the nonsense is we hear a lot of times. And that's what I want to kind of distance ourselves from. But I think you and I are on the same page. And so maybe angry is not the right word to use, but, there's worse words. There's even, you can cause complete destruction in a system, whether it's a biological system or whatever, and not be angry just out of idiocy, right?
All right, and you make a great point. In other words, like parents routinely, punish their children not out of anger, perhaps, but out of love. So, all right, so let's like you're right. I mean, it may not be accurate to characterize God as angry, but He's definitely punishing us. So why is He punishing us?
Okay, so from a systems approach, and God's the system, and we're being punished out of, out of frustration and things not working out. I believe it comes back to the illusions personally, and we've spiritually bypassed in this country, right? We spiritually bypassed specifically in this country, but many countries have as well. And that is, what are we as biopsychosocial creatures? And how do we create a whole system and quit blaming each other, quit blaming the problems on specific people, and realizing that specific people are a product of their environment, right? And try to create an environment that doesn't keep creating those kinds of people, because otherwise we're not going to get past the problem, because it's the same way of thinking that created the problem. And that's just my personal opinion.
All right, I think we're on the same page on this, because basically, what may be happening is like God is telling us, all right, you guys want to, continue to believe in free wills after the last 10 years of like, just like being demonstrated how free will is just like a powerful illusion. If you want to maintain the free will, now you need to understand the implications. Now you need to understand how free will invites blame and vengeance and revenge, and how it escalates and escalates. And in the past, this kind of stuff would lead to wars, a couple of world wars, our civil war and stuff. So yeah, God, you may be right about that. God may be tired of us not, also like from a theological standpoint, God may be tired of us not acknowledging His sovereignty. We, holding us up as many gods, these, it's basically a blasphemous kind of a belief system that I think, you're describing it as causing a lot of pain and suffering, or just causing problems. Maybe you want to like expand on that. How does the illusion of free will that we're buying into, and God is seemingly punishing us for, how is that hurting us?
Yeah, so it hurts us on both sides, no matter whether you're left, right, progressive, conservative, whatever it is. It's the fallacy of both sides. It's the fallacy of all religions, and it's why religion is still evolving, right? And our understanding of consciousness and what it is and what we are is still evolving. So my spiritual practice is not to identify. I consider myself left. I consider myself right. I consider myself every religion, so that I can see this. And for instance, socialism, right? Socialism fails many times, and the conservatives and the capitalists will quote you chapter and verse why, right? But it's not the real right reason. They have to understand that free will doesn't exist, right? And so there are coercive mechanisms in capitalism and marketing that cause capitalism and marketing to fail as well. And this all comes back to the illusion and understanding that we have causal will, and we have to understand the cause and effect. And if we don't understand that and we don't appreciate that, then we're always going to be confused about why these systems fail, whether it's socialism, capitalism, left politics, right politics. And that has to be brought to the forefront, because traditionally government and religion has condemned the self. They've crucified the self. It wasn't the crucifixion of Jesus. It was the crucifixion of the self, right? And so your feelings, your experience isn't valid. And when you do that to any individual, any organism, then that organism shuts down, it gets depressed, it doesn't function well. And we have to figure out this hedonic happiness principle to get the organism to function at its best or close to it so that we can all contribute to a functional society.
All right, I think my take is that, basically illusion of free will hurts us, especially politically, because what happens in our politics? People are so busy, both sides, blaming each other, for this or that, there's no emotional peace in order to objectively explore what needs to be done and how it best needs to be done. Now, I want to go into some of like because I think there's four kind of like horsemen of these great sins that our world is undergoing, and they include both parties. I mean, like, for example, with abortion, okay? Abortion, I think, is extremely wrong, and you have the Democrats supporting it, defending it for decades. Climate change is extremely threatening to our future. You have Republicans denying it. Both parties deny and ignore what we're doing to tens of billions of farm animals every year. And finally, both parties pretty much are ignoring the plight of the poor, mainly the sub-Saharan poor, that their kids are dying at 10,000 a day, and we don't care. So like, basically, these are, I believe, the great sins that we are committing. Now, Josh, you want to kind of like try to explore, given any of them, how this illusion of free will perpetuates them or amplifies them?
Sure. Well, so for instance, I'll just take the sub-Saharan, poor and poverty and just utter crisis that, us in the first world just take for granted and can't even imagine. So the Catholic Church, for example, has a huge presence there, a huge presence and influence there, right? And supposedly, I'm not going to say this is an absolute fact, but credible sources say, point to they've done more harm than good with their policies around contraceptions, right? So they've said you should have a free will and you need to just stop having sex, and we're not going to allow any protection for that. We're going to forbid any condoms in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're not allowed, right? And so AIDS skyrockets, and more children born into poverty skyrockets, right? And so it's obviously good intentions, obviously, holy people that want God's will to be done, right? And
but how does the illusion of free will play into that?
Well, because they believe that, they believe that if we just tell you that sex is bad, now all of a sudden you should just not have sex and you can just control that, right? Completely naive thinking, and I mean, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it doesn't matter. It's every issue, right? So that's one. I can think of more. Climate change, of course we know that. And capitalism, marketing is kind of my pet peeve of thinking that, we can exploit people's emotional vulnerabilities with the most psychologically manipulative marketing that marketers can possibly come up with, right? And not cause people to just buy endless consumerism, endless junk to try to fill those emotional voids, and they all ends up in landfills, and the people end up depressed, right? Back to the climate change, I mean, the climate change is hand in hand with that, because if you're, just spinning the factory's wheels all night and day to create endless products that is supposedly the people who are being marketed to feel are going to make their lives better, but ultimately they don't, and it ends up in landfills, then you're ravaging the planet.
All right, let me address both the abortion and our treatment of animals. Both of these are so clearly horrible. I'm not sure, it may be abortion's worse, because basically we end the lives of as many unborn children, fetuses each year as die of every other cause on the planet combined. And obviously, like, what we're doing to these animals. If you gave me a choice of being in a concentration camp or being a slave or being an animal in one of these farms, I would choose one of the former two, because these animals suffer. So in other words, like, why why don't people get how horrible these things are? My guess is like, we've talked about this before, Josh, is in psychology, there's this concept of denial. When we're confronted with, a reality about ourselves that doesn't coincide with how we want to feel about ourselves, how we need to not just feel about ourselves, but others, our family, friends, we will go into denial. We'll deny that it's happening. We'll deny that we're complicit in it. So with the animals, we'll say to ourselves, oh, well, they probably don't feel pain, which is, everybody knows that's nonsense. With the abortion issue, the argument for years was like, oh, they're not really people until they're born, which is just as bogus. So again, in both of these, horrible, realities in our life, probably stem from people believing that they're really fundamentally responsible for this stuff, and because of that, not being able to face it squarely enough to understand it and finally repent from it and redeem ourselves.
Sure, George. Let's make it interesting here. So I disagree with you on these two issues a little bit for the sake of helping me to understand them better. I'll play the devil's advocate. So,
No, you could be the angel's advocate. I may be wrong.
Well, no, I think you're right. But I'd like to kind of give a more dynamic series here. So with so instance for the abortion, right? Now, imagine if I had to choose between being born into poverty, know I'm going to starve to death in sub-Saharan Africa, I would probably choose to be aborted, right? And of course, there's a best possible option, and that's none of the above, right? And I think that's the kind of the moral high road with this. But I think that's a lot of people's, another argument of people put forward with this abortion issue. And the same thing with, the factory farming is ridiculous, because it could easily be, we could still eat animals and be carnivores if we want. I'm not advocating that, but we could, but treat animals humanely in the process, right? That's not the best option, but it's possible. And with that, I think it comes down to people not being able to feel, right? And so, one of the spiritual practices I have is I watch National Geographic and Animal Planet and stuff like that. And I purposely search for animals eating other animals, right, in the wild, and realize that there's just so much horrible. They're just devastated. Like, watching alligators just rip apart animals, lions just rip apart. And like, it just breaks my heart. It really does to see all this. I also search hunters that are recklessly hunting, and they'll shoot an animal, and this animal gets away with a bullet wound, even in their head sometimes, that they have to live with for the rest of their life. And that's just reckless, right? If you're going to hunt, at least hunt to kill, is what I try to tell them, right? And so for me, it just blows my mind. How can these people not get it? Why would you have all these hunters, they have pet dogs that they love, and they'd never let anything like that happen to them. And they're just animals, they're pet dogs. And it's just such hypocrisy. And for me, it comes back to this illusion of consciousness and almost this illusion of morality that we have to come to terms with, that morality isn't this thing we're born with and isn't this solid thing. It's something that has to be cultivated. And I think at the root of that is we have to be able to feel others' pain. We have to be able to have empathy. It's this empathy, and whether it's animals or somebody that's, going to live a life of misery because they live in sub-Saharan Africa, or even, a mother who has or would-be mother, in worst case even, that has to live with the fact that she had an abortion, right? Instead of taking the action to be responsible in the first place.
So yeah, Josh, I want to address, you bring up a very important point. We're only ever guessing at the morality of what we're doing. And so to connect this very closely to God, you're right. For decades as a Democrat, I said, yes, that basically our basic belief in Judaism and Christianity and in Islam probably is that before we're born, we're with God, and then after we die, we return to God, so and there's even a belief within Catholicism, and I think within Judaism also, that if a person dies before they turn 5, whatever the age of accountability is, they're spared any chance that they'll end up in hell. And a lot of people believe that there's actually a hell that people go to if they're really bad. So within that context, one could make the assertion that it's more compassionate to spare, these children, not just the horrible life in sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of the world, and sometimes here in the United States, but also spare them the chance of ending up in hell. So yes, you're basically, connecting this with the morality is very important. We're only guessing, but so like it's, again, although I've kind of like defended, the abortion as perhaps the lesser of two evils. Now because of what happened, because of Trump winning in 2016 and all this, I'm beginning to really question this. So again, returning to our theme, it seems like God is using these politics to get us to look at certain things, to get us to more closely examine what we're doing and why.
That's interesting. I think it's worth noting, because you said this to me before, like the only reason you would even consider voting for Trump or even admiring him is because of the abortion issue. And I think that is very interesting. It's sad that our
Well, actually, no, I don't believe Trump cares about abortion. The Republicans do. Go ahead.
So he does for votes, but yeah. So hopefully it would turn out that way. And he'd honor that. But that's just interesting. We don't have a democracy in this country. It's a republic. A democracy, it's again semantics that's been hijacked, and they say, oh, well, a democracy where everybody votes, that's called a direct democracy. Of course we don't have that, but yes, we could have that now with our technology, certainly. But that's another issue. I think yeah, it's sad that we're at this point where we have to kind of vote for the lesser of two evils. We're kind of gambling, right? And our real convictions, our real alignment may be with independence or the Green Party or something, right? But we can't vote for them because we know they're not going to win, so it's just wasting our vote.
I know, but Josh, right? We've both been exploring this from the perspective of we human beings doing this. But again, we have to remind ourselves, we know this intellectually, that this series is going to be profoundly about this, that, what's happening is not up to us. All these horrible things, it's all up to God. How do you explain that?
Yeah, it'd have to go back to our earlier episodes where we define God and we kind of redefined evil and
no, I'm not asking you to explain the dynamics or the in other words, yes, you and I at least get that everything is up to God, right? But the question is like, fine, everything is up to God, but why these abortions? Why the climate change and the poverty and all that stuff? And why these crazy elections?
Yeah, it's causality, and that's what we've got to learn to realize, see the causal factors. And, we have 50 states in this country. We're not all the same people. It would be insane for me to say, I go to my doctor and he gives me this drug, and that's the only drug that works. That's the one true drug, and that's the drug that you have to take, for your issues. That'd be insane. We don't do that. We don't do that with food, with our music, with anything. But yet we do it with this politics, and we do it with religion, and that's what's got us off track, right? So there is a definite line of things that are immoral, right? But to push things on people and not let them be autonomous and understand, become into relationship with their will being causal, right? What causes them to tick? What causes them to sin, quote unquote sin, or what causes them to fail, whatever it is, versus, being told you're just not trying hard enough. You're just a failure. You're a loser. Why can't you get a job? Why can't you keep a job? Why, whatever it is. Why can't you exercise? Why are you fat? Whatever it is. And I think that's, it's just been a whole lot of shadow projection in all the institutions, politics, religion, science. It's just been a whole lot of traumatized children growing up to be adults and trying to push their own trauma onto other people, in my opinion. And that's not all of it. I recognize that's not all of it. And all of these institutions have given us valuable insight that's not all bunk, of course. That's just my perspective.
All right. So yeah, I want to kind of like reframe this. So basically what we're saying, is that this illusion that we have a free will is causing us to blame each other. And when we blame each other, we want each other punished and defeated, and just we want pain to come to the other side. And this has been coming. This is, as you mentioned earlier, this has been growing over the last decades. We're blaming and blaming more and more. Now, I'm going to give this a positive spin. If this was 100 or 200 years ago, it would end up with a civil war or something like that. In other words, like this would escalate, to the point where we would begin killing each other. Now, so like our world has evolved, hopefully, apparently beyond that, at least in this country, where God is essentially limiting the arena of conflict to politics. He's basically making us all go nuts about the politics in order to spare us, the ultimate outcome that would have happened before of our just like, killing each other, literally. So like we can be thankful, I think, again, like, to give God a kind of like a trust and a faith that what God is doing is for our benefit. It could be that again, these crazy politics we've been experiencing for decades is really to show us, in a way that's relatively benign, our our misgivings, and to hopefully, as you were saying, like to show us that it just stems from this belief in free will, so we can evolve. So, okay, Josh, you can provide about a minute and a half, close out the show.
Certainly, George. So yeah, for me, it's our evolution of consciousness, and we can't. It doesn't help to say the ways in the past were all wrong. Maybe they were right for those times. We weren't there, right? But we have to continue to evolve, and for me, that comes down to deeper relationship with ourselves, with each other, with what it means to be human, with what consciousness is, with what will is and why will is caused, and with our world, our environment. And how we are part of it. It's a unified system. So, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm excited about it, and I think it's going to be a bright future. And we shouldn't let the drama to kind of get us down and cause us into a downward spiral. We should keep going up with it, and that's kind of my opinion. What do you think about all that?
Excellent. And so, like, basically this series is about God. And, a major part of understanding that we don't have a free will, that nothing is up to us, is to understand that everything that is up to God. And as we as a world, explore God better, don't think that like these scientific reductionists, that God doesn't even exist. If we acknowledge God's existence, acknowledge that God is supreme, then we can hopefully understand ourselves and our relations to the world in a way that will allow us to evolve. All right, thanks for watching, and we will see you again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks.